Hi, my name is Dori Gorman, and I get to be the chaplain for the YMCA of Middle Tennessee. It's good to be with you today. One of the things I've been reflecting upon recently is a story found in the book of Exodus about a group of people called the Israelites and how God miraculously rescued them and brought them out of slavery in Egypt and sent them on a journey to a promised land, a new place that he was going to bring them to, a place that was described as flowing with milk and honey. But before they arrived there, they made a lot of poor choices. They complained against God, they rebelled against God, and they ended up having to wander in the desert for over 40 years. That journey from Egypt to the promised land should have taken like maybe 11 days, but instead they ended up wandering for 40 years. Now, you might be thinking, oh great, Dori, that reminds you of right now. I certainly hope we aren't in this time of the coronavirus for 40 years. But I do think we are in a time of the land between. Perhaps we weren't in slavery before, but we have a before, the way things were before this virus, and we have a future, but we don't know when it will come. We don't know how it will be different. We don't know how we will be different. And so we are living in the land between. This is also described by an author named Jeff Mannion in his book called The Land Between, and subtitled Finding God in Difficult Transitions. Might be a good book for you to pick up right now, as he talks about the journey of the Israelites out of Egypt and the time that they lived in the land between. And one of the things he talks about is this food that God provided for the Israelites during their time in the land between. And it was called manna. And all manna means is, what is it? They saw it, they didn't know what it was, but every morning it would just appear kind of on the grass, and it was food for them. And it was just enough food for that day. And there's this warning from God: if you gather more, if you hoard, then it'll go bad overnight. But God gave just enough, and on the sixth day he gave enough for 2 days, so that on the seventh day they could rest. And it was just this incredible provision of God. But over time, the Israelites began to complain about the manna. And one of the things that Jeff Mannion notes is it probably wasn't the taste. It wasn't necessarily described as having a bad taste, but it was the monotony of the manna. Every single day, the same food. I don't know about you. I am thankful that I have enough provision to be eating different things every day. But I do feel a monotony of every day. It just kind of feels the same. If you've ever seen the movie Groundhog Day, it can feel like that. And even if each day brings unique challenges or unique things that I may be working on, there's still a monotony to this time. The other day I said to my husband, I turned and said, I just miss being spontaneous. I feel like I can't be spontaneous right now because everything is so structured and kind of has a monotony to it. And as I've sat with that this week, I've kind of thought, what is the lesson from the Israelites? Because we need to learn from their mistakes, and their mistake was complaining. They complained, and not only to one another, but to God. So I've been sitting this week with the question, what is the difference between grieving and complaining? Because I think there is a place for grief right now. People are dying, people are sick, businesses are struggling, people are losing their jobs. We are all together going through a challenging, sad time in our world. And there is a lot to grieve. We are also seeing some of the best of humanity as people step up and serve and care and love in really kind ways. But even that doesn't necessarily, and probably even shouldn't, take away the grief that we need to own and name as grief. But what is the difference between grieving and complaining. I think of grief as a process that you work through when you are deeply saddened. It's very internal. Now you may talk about it with others, but it's a process that you journey through, that you know, there's stages of grief that you go through, and it's not even linear, but we kind of bounce back around these different stages of grief. But complaining to me is just external. It is just getting out what you're feeling in the moment because you want to get it off your chest. And complaining quickly becomes blaming. And that's where the Israelites got in trouble. You see, they weren't just complaining about the manna, but they began to blame God. You've done this to us. And they even began to say, we had it better back in Egypt, back in slavery than we do now. And so complaining is this external blame. And quickly when you complain, you begin to be the victim, that something's been done to you. As opposed to grief is actually very empowering because you name what you've done as well as what you're experiencing, but not in a blameful way. And so as I think about these two things of grief and complaint, I have to ask myself, and I invite us to ask, where are you today? Are you grieving in a healthy way in the midst of some monotonous days? Or are you complaining? There's a passage in Philippians 2:14. It says, do everything without complaining or arguing. Whew. I confess I have not done everything without complaining. But then we're told in a different passage in 1 Thessalonians 4 that we can grieve, but we just don't grieve as those without hope. So it is my prayer today that you do have hope as you grieve, and that hope is what enables you to not complain. That hope is what carries you through to tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, we begin to be grateful for the monotonous days that we have, because at least we have a day. At least we have breath in our lungs. At least right now in this moment, we are alive.